you don't know how good you have it. Right? You should be blessed that I'm here. If
Right.
you don't do what I say and do it the way I wanted to, I am out of
I'm
here.
out.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when I started seeing, the tea leaves, reading the tea leaves, I was like, oh, I see where this is going. I was like,
Mhm.
baby,
Right.
I'm gonna stay long enough to get what I got to get and get out.
And get
Okay.
out. Hey everyone, welcome to Unapologetically 50 Plus. My name is Angela. So today we are going to be talking about we're never too old to start over. But before we get started, I have one huge favor to ask. If you find any value or enjoy the content, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, and let YouTube know you want more of this content. It's free and you are helping us build this community. So thank you. We truly appreciate your support. All right, let me bring on my guest and let's get this conversation started. Hey love, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the invite, Angela. I'm excited.
I'm happy to have you on. So, first, let folks know who you are. Tell them a little bit about Lisbon, why you moved there, and then we're going to get straight into the questions.
Yeah. So, hi, everybody. I'm Chrishan Wright. I'm the founder of Blaxit Global and the host of the Blaxit Global podcast. I started Blaxit Global in 2020, and I focus on helping Black people move abroad. So, if you are a Black person and you are looking to move abroad, hit me up. Let's get this party started.
Yeah.
As Angela said, I moved to Lisbon, Portugal, which is now my home. I moved in 2023, so I'm coming up on 2 years, which is crazy.
That is.
And I love it. Lisbon is a cosmopolitan city. It's very diverse. I have access to, 28 other countries in the European Union, fresh food, beautiful architecture, just a real safe and happy life here. And so I hope that this conversation encourages you to, take the leap or at least look into more about what life could look like.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know I remember what when you were waiting for your card. That's
Mhm,
how long I've been watching you. You were still waiting for your card to come in, and you were
mhm.
like, I can't go anywhere until I get my card. I'm like, what?
I
What's
was
going
on lockdown.
to go lockdown? And I was like, okay. But it gave me insight as to what I need to look forward to. Like you always say, you got to be patient out there. But
Mhm.
I'm like, when you're in a new environment and there's different things you have to adjust to. I'm like, that's the perfect time to peruse the city, get to know your new
Right.
environment, where you're going to be living. So,
Mhm.
um, and didn't you have your a big birthday on a yacht out
I
there?
did. I did. I did. I did. I had my 50th birthday last June, and I'm a go big or go home type of girl. So I said, "Oh, I planned it. Oh gosh." And when I was 48, because I was on a yacht for the first time in Bali.
Mm-hmm.
And I had wanted to be on a yacht. It started coming up maybe 2 years before. And I was like, okay, when I go to Bali, I gotta be on this yacht. And all of a sudden, I manifested it because I was on this yacht in Bali. And I'm like, oh, well, if I can manifest this, then I want this for my 50th. And as soon as I got to Portugal, found the perfect yacht and executed it very well, I have to say. My theme was Harlem Renaissance. And those that know me personally know that I can go very deep. And so I wanted to reflect on, this 50 years, this half a century that I've been on this planet, but also recognizing that not only in my life, but in so many Black people's lives that are choosing this life abroad.
Yeah.
This is the next great migration. This is our Renaissance. And, I saw the 100 year, there was so much synergy, right? The
Mm.
1920s to being in the 2020s. And I was like, oh, that's the theme.
Yeah.
That's the theme.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Nice. That. Okay, because I plan to do by the time I get out there, I'll have enough time to plan my 60th. So
Ooh,
that's what I plan
yes.
to do. So I don't know what
60,
it'll be.
60.
That's right. That's what I plan to do. So let me ask you this. How has, moving abroad at this stage? Because I know you
Mhm.
moved earlier. I know you moved, in your late 40s, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But now that you have hit that milestone,
hmm
how has moving abroad changed your perspective on what you want out of your remaining years?
Ooh, well, hopefully it'll be a long time. I have a lot of,
At least
thankfully, a
another
lot of,
30.
yeah, at least I have a lot of longevity in my family. I have to say,
Nice.
I've been fortunate in that regard. I have an uncle, my father's oldest sibling
hmm
is in his 90s. On my
Ooh,
mom's side, my mom is one of 12. She's in her 80s. Her oldest sibling is approaching 90. Her oldest
nice.
living sibling is approaching 90, but my aunt, her oldest sibling, was in her mid 90s before she passed on. My
Okay.
grandparents lived, my great grandmother lived to be over 100. I think she was 108 when she died.
Okay.
So I
Okay. You
got to
got
meet
some
her. So
longevity.
thankfully, we've got
You got
some,
it. You're in the
I'm
you're in the
hoping.
you're in the best place to have that longevity. So,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And that was really what spurred my interest to answer the
Okay.
question. So where I grew up in the Bronx, Co-op City. So it was very it's funny because when I think about where I live in Lisbon, it reminds me a lot of my upbringing in Co-op City. But
Hmm.
one of the things that I loved was the diversity. I loved the green spaces. I walked everywhere. Granted, I was a minor, so I didn't have a car, but those were the things that were pulling on me because as I started traveling the world in 2017, I went on my first solo trip to New Zealand. And
Mm,
I'm seeing these people, you know, get up and bike and walk. And I reflected on my life in the States where it was like I had become so car dependent,
yes. Yeah.
and sedentary with the office job, with the corporate job. And looking at what that was taking a physical toll on my body, right? Laxity in the muscles, but also, brain fog, because I found myself in the jobs that I had, while they were high paying jobs, I wasn't really pulling on the skills that I had acquired over my lifetime. Like, I'm just writing quick little email responses like yes, no,
Mm-hmm.
writing copy for social media. So it's even more truncated. And so I
hmm
found myself getting soft on my writing skills, my language skills, just things that I just wasn't flexing and utilizing the way I did in my earlier career.
hmm
And I said, wow, I don't want the rest of my life to be this way. I don't want to get to this quote unquote age of retirement, you know, whatever the age is supposed to be. Now that I'm retired, I'm like, what is the proper age? I guess 65. I don't know.
You mean the proper age
And
for the United States? I think the proper age
exactly. Which is
anywhere.
a scam. Just
That.
just in case anybody who's watching this wants to know like how I feel about it. It's a scam. So I was like, oh wow, I just didn't want that. And I wanted to be more active. And I saw people in my family, while we did have a lot of age and years, are they healthy years? Are they healthy years in terms of physical capability and abilities? Are they healthy in terms of mental acuity? And as I was traveling the world and also seeing in other cultures, I'm not seeing these big nursing homes. I'm not seeing young people and older people in these devices to move about the stores and things like that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing leaner physique. I'm seeing better food,
Right.
more affordable food, people that I guess traditionally would be considered old, but they're running and they're doing all these things. And I'm like, if I stay on the trajectory and on the path that
Mm.
I've already laid out for myself of what I thought was the good life,
Yeah.
is it really a good life? And so I started to ask myself these questions and challenge my beliefs. And the more I started to travel, the more I realized and confirmed for me that leaving the US was what I wanted to do for the second half of my life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because, still being in the United States, everything that you've said about the longevity, yeah, you can have longevity, but what kind of quality of life?
Hmm.
Oh, and I don't know about how with you being in Portugal and having to walk up all those them hills in Lisbon. But I even find myself being more sedentary, and I'm pretty good about, okay, I need to get at least 10,000 steps. But we rely so much on our cars, and because depending on where you live, the safety factor of not being
Yeah,
able
yeah.
to, as a woman in particular, not being able to just get up and go out and go for, a walk to the grocery store,
Hmm.
and then, like you said, the cost of groceries and all the things that make it hard to have a long, healthy life. You can have a
Hmm.
long life, but if your life is not in it's if you're not um, if it's not healthy, if you're not able to be mobile and just do for self, then what to me it's like what's the point? It
Absolutely. And can you afford it? That's the other part of it
oh
is the affordability. I had the benefit for a number of years to have a high salary, but I was also raising my children, by myself. I'm divorced, and sure, there are their fathers around, but the household ran with me as the sole breadwinner. And
right.
so I had to think about planning for my retirement, planning for my kids' education,
Yeah.
also paying for our lifestyle, which was very expensive in New Jersey, even though I
Mm,
wasn't like I wasn't balling, I wasn't doing all the things. My only big expenditure was trips because I
mhm.
found that I was discovering aspects of my personality that I didn't even know was there. And so that was like my only main center of pleasure and enjoyment. But I started to realize the affordability factor. It's like, well, what is things gonna cost? Like medicine, if I need care, or things like that. And so I just realized that as Americans, we're sold a bag of goods. We're told that this carrot, retirement is something that you earn at the end of the race, and not realizing you may want to stop working by choice.
Right.
You may want to be work optional. You also may unfortunately have that decision made for you, either because ageism exists in America,
Hmm.
ableism exists in America.
Hmm.
You may unfortunately, or someone in your family, need to have care unexpectedly, and that takes you out of the workforce. And so you have to be proactive because the society does not have any safety nets, which we are in the little few that they did have are being swept away, right? Very quickly.
Right.
And so that's why I say you have to be very proactive. You can't be, a pacifist in this whole endeavor. You have to be proactive and think about your future state. And
Exactly.
so what I really enjoy about the life that I've created for myself is that it is deliberate and it's intentional. And it's the most authentic I've ever been in my entire life.
That's nice. That's why I keep watching you and Halisi and Rick, because it keeps me motivated, because it's easy to slip back into, well,
Mhm.
but that's why I'm always like, okay, I need to keep motivated, and because this is
Mhm.
a process, and as we get older, then you go like, oh, do I really want to go through this? But
Mhm.
that's why I like listening to you, because you do keep me motivated to keep moving forward with all with this whole endeavor, because while it's not extremely hard, there's steps and it's a process.
Mhm.
So I appreciate you for being also very authentic in your own podcast.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate that. Thank
um,
you.
what unique advantages do you feel, your age has given you in adapting to a new country? Because I know you were going through learning Portuguese, and I hear European Portuguese is a little more complicated than Brazilian Portuguese. I'm
Little
like,
bit.
so how was that as a start to the question? How was learning, or you're still learning, but
Sim, muito bem, muito bem. Eu falo um pouco português. It's a very interesting language. It's a very difficult language. But once you start to understand and kind of think differently about it, and also give yourself some grace, I don't take myself seriously. I can order food, I can have brief conversations, but it sounds like somebody who's having a conversation with a 2-year-old,
right.
right? Because my grasp of the language, my sentence structure, my grammar, I'm confident is off, right? In certain conversations.
Uh,
I have not yet really learned past tense, so I only speak in the present. The future hasn't happened. I haven't learned the past. But to answer the question, what I do value about moving abroad, and in this particular chapter of my life, while I wanted to do it earlier in my life, I didn't have the money. I learned that early on that other countries don't want you in there if you can't afford to be there.
right.
And I didn't have the money. And when I look at where I am now, yes, I have the financial means to live here and live a very comfortable life. But outside of that is I have the wisdom and the experience to call on. I have the talents and skills to make money. I didn't move with a corporate job. I had a corporate job. I
Mm,
thought that that was going to be part of my move. That's how I envisioned it.
okay.
And they were of a different belief. Right. And so if I had been wedded to the thought that I had to place my future in someone else's hands,
Hmm.
then they would have held all the cards. They would have decided what my move looked like, where it was, if it happened. And so one of the things that I did, even though I had already started the podcast and I had gone, back to my former employer, I was very transparent. I'm like, I'm moving abroad in 2023. I've got this podcast. I was like, look, I done did all the awards. I done got all the points on the board. I
Yeah.
have nothing to hide. You like it or leave it, baby. And that confidence, that gravitas would not have come out of 25-year-old Chrishan, right?
Right.
Because she would
Right.
have been so worried about checking the boxes, being non-threatening, keeping myself in a way that it was tolerable, right?
Right.
Whereas this version of me is like, psh, you don't know how good you have it, right? You should be blessed that I'm here. If
Right.
you don't do what I say and do it the way I wanted to, I am out of
I'm
here,
out.
right?
Yeah.
And so when I started seeing, the tea leaves, reading the tea leaves, I was like, oh, I see where this is going. I was like,
Mhm.
baby,
Right.
I'm gonna stay long enough to get what I got to get and get out,
And get
okay?
out. Yeah.
And so we have to play chess, not checkers. And so when you're very strategic and you start to shift how you're playing the game, because a game is being played whether you know it or not.
Hmm.
And so, do you want to be in command of the chessboard?
Mm.
Once you start to shift that energy, everything changes. And so that's why I say I'm so blessed that to have this, I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm 50 and that was for somebody in their 20s or 30s or early 40s. Heck no.
Mhm.
I'm like, baby, I am just getting started. I'm
Right.
getting the yachts. I'm going to Nice and in Monaco in May and in Amsterdam. I got all these countries I've got. I'm like,
I got things to
baby,
do.
no. My life is waiting for me,
Yeah.
right? I just came back from Vietnam and Thailand. I spent a month there. I'm like, I am just getting started. So
Right.
for anybody who's watching this thinking, oh, I'm in my 60s, I'm in my 70s, I'm approaching 50. Honey,
Right.
it's not over until you are in the
Until.
ground.
Right. Exactly.
It is
Exactly.
not over.
Exactly. I like that. How was your move? How did your family take your move, especially your kids?
Oh, they're great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I prepped them early. So the benefit of my move was I decided in 2017 that this was going to be my future life. And at that point, my son was still in high school and
Mhm.
my daughter was still in middle school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I told them, like, this is where it's gonna go. And I told my mother later on. And each year, it was just really getting them used to it, reiterating like the plan hadn't changed. And then as it got closer to time,
Hmm.
my son was out of the house at that point. He
Okay.
was in college. My daughter was in high school. Obviously, COVID was going on. And so that obviously, caused a big change in her schedule and life.
Hmm.
But we went into counseling. And it
Okay.
really was to prep her and myself for what is this going to look like? How are we going to stay in
Mm.
touch? When do you need me to be there? Right? When do I want to be there, for, spending time with my mom, moments that matter in my children's lives.
Hmm.
And so those were things that were pre-discussed and pre-negotiated so that by the time it was, time for me to go, there was nothing but excitement. And now that I'm here, my daughter's been here twice on school breaks. Both my brothers have been here now to visit.
Okay.
Um, the only one who hasn't yet is my son because he just started a new job. And so I'm just
Okay.
like, it's better than I had thought it was going to be. And so I'm glad that I didn't let other people's projections get
Okay.
into my head because there were
Yeah.
people that were like, oh, you're gonna leave your kids? I'm like, you mean those whole grown adults?
Girl. Girl, yes. That's what we
You
have.
mean those
Those
kids?
adults, right. They're adults. And
Yes.
that's the thing I'm struggling but not struggling with is with the move my children because my oldest, he's 35. My daughter will
Oh,
be
wow.
25 in
Yeah.
April. So, and it's not like we have family dinners every week. We
Hmm.
see each other, talk to each other, but it's not like we do it every day. And so,
Hmm.
folks are like, but what about your kid? What about your grandkids? Because I do have, and we have an older, my bonus daughter, she's
Hmm.
36. And so we have two grandbabies, but I'm like, I don't
Oh.
see, but they're 2 hours away. We're in Oakland, California, they're in
Mm.
Sacramento. So I'm like, they're 2 hours away. I don't see them every day. I don't
Mhm.
talk to them every day. I said, that's what all this technology,
Yes.
it's going to work.
It's
But
the best time in the world to actually move abroad, right?
exactly,
Because you're
exactly.
aided by technology. You have the ability to send a picture, an
Right.
email, a video,
A
right?
video. You can
So many
FaceTime and,
things.
talk,
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, I think that's a lot. Both my parents are gone, so I don't have to worry about them. My
Sorry.
husband's father's still around, so, but you're right. This is the best time for
Mhm.
us, and doing it, whether you're, like you said, 50, 60, or 70, just do it. And I
Mhm.
think we have to get that out of our head also, as we know, get out of your head that America is the best place on earth because it ain't.
Mhm. Yeah,
It
yeah. And
ain't.
and
So,
question things, question what you've been conditioned,
oh,
like the
that's deep.
whole, thing about, oh, are you leaving your kids? No one ever says that to a man who says he's moving abroad,
That's true.
right?
That's
People say,
true.
oh, are you moving are there black people there? You never hear
That's
somebody, a
true.
white person who's moving abroad, and they say, are white people there?
Right.
It's like you have to start to decolonize your mind and
Mm,
deconstruct the things that are in there. It's like, are you allowing certain things to enter your consciousness?
right.
And you have to question those things. And so that's why I feel like wisdom and discernment are your friend. And that's the beauty if you're so fortunate to go allow yourself to go deep and start to, get your mind in the mindset
Mm-hmm.
to make a move. It's not just the physical move, that's just
Right.
logistics, right?
Right.
It's your
Right.
mind because you take you wherever you are.
Yeah.
If you're a hot mess in the United States, you're going to be a hot mess in whatever country you're going to be in, right? And so
Yeah.
you have to take some responsibility for
Right.
that and question things like, is America the greatest country in the world? When I went to Vietnam, I made a trip to Ho Chi Minh City
Mm.
specifically because I wanted to see the War Remnants Museum. And it's because the War Remnants Museum takes the perspective of the Vietnamese people who
Mm-hmm.
were deeply impacted by this 20-year war. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing whole families, you're seeing names listed in the stories
Mm-hmm.
that you do not see when you look at the museum or even movies or documentaries about the war from the United States perspective. And so it really enabled me to question some of the things. And there were some very, very disturbing, images and stories, even about politicians who were involved in the war that never are talked about in the United States. And that is why I say when you give yourself the gift of travel, you start to question these things. Why wasn't I told about this? Just like I wasn't told about the kings and queens in Africa,
Nope.
just like I wasn't told
No.
about a lot of things, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
still discovering hidden figures,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so that's why I say, like, it doesn't matter what country you choose if you choose this life,
Mm-hmm.
but realize that you're a global citizen
Right.
and the onus is on you to have this richer experience. And that's the gift, honestly, of moving abroad at whatever age.
Right. Right. I like that. So, looking back, do you think, well, you already said that probably not, but if you had had the funds, would you have moved earlier in your life, even with your kids?
Yes.
Because, okay, okay,
Hmm. Yes. I would have done a few things differently. Yes.
okay. Would you have brought, would you, because I know there's some folks who are like, well, my kids are still in school. Would you have made that if you could have financially said, look, kids, we're going to move to another country?
Hmm.
You would have, okay.
Hmm.
How do you
Hmm.
think they would have dealt with
Oh,
that?
I think, hindsight's always 2020, right? So if I
Mm-hmm.
had done it when I was younger and married, I think it would have been a great experience for
Mm-hmm.
the family as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, had I done it, if I had negotiated my divorce differently, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha. And
Yeah.
and even back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. So even with my move, there's an added layer because
Mm.
I'm doing the move by myself. And my husband's
Mm.
staying back for a while because, again, he's an only child. He doesn't want to leave his father. His mom just recently passed, so he definitely
Mm.
doesn't
So
want to leave his
sorry.
father. Yeah. Um, and so there's that other layer of guilt. Oh, you're leaving your husband? But you're right, what you said. Would they say that to a man who is traveling? Maybe he has to travel everywhere. Well, that's his job. He has to travel or blah, blah, blah. Or, yeah, like you said, if you were divorced and had kids and moving abroad, well, the kids can go visit him. So I never thought of it in that perspective that there's a different outlook when a woman says, "Hey, love you guys, but this is what I got to do." And there's something about 50 at least, and you kind of learned it a little bit earlier than I did, but there's something about the age of 50 and older for most of us that we go, wait a minute. It's time for me. I'm doing me, you know.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a wonderful feeling. There's a lot of mixed emotions, but it's a wonderful
Mhm.
feeling because you come into your own, especially for
Yes.
those of us who have been married, have children, maybe we're divorced now, but there's this change, this I say aha moment, this
Mhm.
epiphany that, I've done 30 plus years or whatever it is. I've done everything for everybody else. Now I'm going to do for me. And
Hmm.
I hope you guys are along for the ride, but if not, I see you when I
Yeah.
see you. Love you.
Hmm.
The love doesn't stop, but I've got to
Yeah.
do this for me. So that
Hmm.
was I like that perspective when you said that. So, what unexpected hobbies or passions have you discovered during this new chapter? And you already said you like travel, so what else? I say you
Yachts.
were doing. Are you back in your Pilates? Are you back in your Pilates since you're finished with your?
No, I am not, sadly, because my knees are in my mind I'm a young 50, but my knees are maybe like an old 60. And so um, I've been dealing with some knee issues, and so I've had to learn to readjust, some of
Okay.
my focus in terms of my physical exercise. So I do my walking, of course, 10,000 steps a day. I've been incorporating a lot more stretching in my day-to-day and
Okay.
weightlifting as I'm, trying to adjust through these mobility issues. Um, but yeah, in terms of hobbies, I've been trying new things. So last year it was Pilates. This year, what I'm excited about doing, in addition to a lot of travel, is I want to do a pottery class.
Oh.
I've been wanting to do that.
Mm,
And so just exploring some of those other like passions.
hmm.
Late last year, I did 5 months of Portuguese. So that was 4 days a week, two and a half hours a day. So that
Not
was
like
10 hours a week.
wait a minute, how many? Oh, you
Um,
said 2.5 hours. Okay, I thought you said four
two
hours
and
a day. I was like, oh,
Yeah, two and a half
okay.
hours a day. Yeah, it
Okay.
was 10 hours a week. So it was intense, to
Yeah.
be thinking in another language. But I think the beauty of learning a foreign language at this stage is that you know yourself at
Hmm.
50, right?
Right, right,
And so you know how best you learn. Do I
right,
learn better in the morning? Do I learn better in the afternoon or evening? Do
right,
I learn better in a classroom? Am I better with, online?
right.
Am I a visual learner? Like all of these things that you
Hmm.
can literally, and just by aided with technology,
Hmm.
cater how best you learn. And so I think that's one of the things that has been helpful for me to be less intimidated about it.
Hmm.
But I've also, pondered other things. Like I thought about taking some sailing classes.
Ooh,
Just things. So, will I do
yeah.
it? I don't know, but the thought has entered my mind. And then before I left, I remember I had in my phone a list of things that I wanted to do, and I've done actually quite a few of them on the list, but I was like, oh, I want to go truffle hunting. I was like,
Truffle hunt. Okay.
truffle hunting, the truffles. I
Yes.
was like, where did that come from? I don't know.
I've never heard
So
of that, but okay, okay.
I don't even know where it came from. It wasn't even like I saw something on TV and I was like, oh, I want to do like just these bizarre things that have like entered my mind. But I think it's because they can. It's because I now have space
Yeah.
in my mind
Hmm.
where it's not where's that next dollar gonna come from?
Girl.
How am I gonna make ends meet this month?
Yeah.
Sitting in traffic and thinking, oh my gosh, what time do I have to leave? Because I don't want to have to deal with this. Like all of those distractions, all of those decision points,
Right.
those points of friction are
Hmm.
not there. And
Right.
so I get to have my slow mornings, my multiple naps during the day, all of these things that just allow me to live a fuller and a brighter life,
Yeah.
right, than I did
Yeah.
before. So no day looks like the day before, which is what I love. And it just gives me the opportunity to just pursue whatever interests me.
Beautiful. That's okay. You keep talking, girl. Keep talking, because I'm like going,
That's
okay,
all right. I'm gonna have you over
pull.
here by next week.
Right. So what was the moment when you realized you needed change?
Ooh. Uh, the honest question was, it was something I always knew.
Okay.
So when I was younger, I grew up in the Bronx, as I mentioned before, and I don't know what it was. I still don't know. And I left some of my journals in the States, but I used to journal when I was younger, and I remember journaling that when I was 26, I wanted to be a corporate lawyer living in New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
And
What
where that
made you?
came
Okay, I
from,
was going
I
to ask,
don't
where you?
know.
Where New Zealand? Where did that come? I mean,
A
okay,
little
well,
black girl in the Bronx is thinking about some who hadn't even no passport, family wasn't traveling, that whole thing. Like, who does that, right? So I held on to that for so long. And as an adult, that started to get further and further away. So the short answer is I think there was something in me that always knew that
mm,
this was the life that I wanted. However, there were real and perceived barriers to that.
right.
And as I started to get older and have more life experience, I realized that goes back to what I said about playing chess and not checkers. I realized that the game was being played and I'm a participant in it, whether I like it or not, or whether I think I am or not. And
Right.
so, am I going to be an active player of this game and play as best as I can with the goal of winning?
Hmm.
And winning has to be what I determine, right? Not by somebody else's judgment. And so that's where I feel like the true answer is.
Okay.
And the gift was reconnecting with that earlier version of myself that wanted it and said, hey, this is still possible if you want to go down this route, if you want to choose you. And so giving myself permission to pursue it
Hmm.
was really the gift.
Nice. Have you found it easier to make friends at this age? I mean, especially because you moved there by yourself, and I'm sure you
Mhm,
know you had already done some of your homework and found a community, but
mhm.
still, you can find a community, but engaging and becoming a part of that community is a different story. So has
Yeah.
it been easier for you finding your
Mhm.
community, at this stage in your life?
I think yes and no, right? I say yes because I founded Blaxit Global 3 years before I moved. So as my brand grew, as my visibility grew,
Hmm.
of course, my network grew. And so, fortunately, I can travel to almost any land and somebody's there to hang out with. I got people hang out with in Vietnam, Thailand. I was like, oh, hey, seeing people from Jersey, like all these things.
Yeah.
So, in that respect, I would say yes. Um, I think that my relationships and my friendships are more authentic now. I
Yeah.
have my friend Emily, who's Portuguese, who I actually met online um, 3 years before I moved here, and 2 years
Oh.
before I even knew that I wanted to move to Portugal.
Oh, okay.
And so I would say, yeah, I'd say the relationships are more authentic because in the United States, a lot of the relationships are transactional. I had work friends,
Yeah.
right? But did I have real friends? Did I have long-lasting friends? Yeah, I had a few I could count on one hand. And
Yeah.
it's definitely not about quantity, it's more about quality.
Right.
But I would say the quality of the friendships that I have now are meaningful in more ways and less transactional.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Because I know that's the one thing in my own head, I'm thinking, I'm on online communities for
Hmm.
expats, especially particularly in Portugal. But you have that little bit of fear, like, am I going to be
Hmm.
able to? And I know I will. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm an introvert, extrovert, more
Hmm.
introvert, but I'm like, I'll be able to do it. It's just a matter of getting out there and just being, like you said, being authentic because it
Yeah.
shouldn't be transactional. Not at this stage. I don't think that this stage of our
Mm-mm.
lives it should be transactional anymore. It should definitely be, I want to have authentic friendships
Hmm.
and have a more meaningful connection with people.
Hmm. Yeah, and
especially
everybody's on a different path, right?
right,
And so you have to respect that. And it's not to say that if somebody, you want to be friends with or vice versa,
right,
for whatever reason it doesn't click. Sometimes you're on a different vibrational frequency, and that's
right,
okay.
right,
Respect for where people are
exactly.
and move on. It may not be that time, it may never be, right?
Right, right,
And so I still say, wisdom and discernment is still something to your advantage because, again, some people have not done the work. They've
right,
physically moved themselves from wherever place they were before their home country, but they're on a different level of consciousness. And so you'll find your tribe, right? Like
right,
attracts like. And
right,
I think when you're in this chapter, because not everybody chooses this life,
right,
you're already breathing rarefied air, so to speak.
right,
And so it's really just, if you want to extend yourself, finding, people that are like-minded, I think it's a lot easier because everybody's not on that grind. Everybody's not riding a struggle bus,
right,
right? And,
right,
and so I think because of that, it goes back to what I said before about having that space to like, oh, just sometimes we just get together and have a glass of wine and sit in the park and eat grapes and watch kids play and dogs running
right,
around, right?
right.
Like you'll find the people that you'll mesh with.
Yeah,
And if not, that's okay too, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And one thing I did like what you said is even though you might be moving physically, where are you mentally? And I
Mhm.
started, and I said, for me, I was like, before I do move, before I make this move, and basically be out there doing this solo, I need to get some therapy. I need to talk to someone about what I'm going through right now and how I'm feeling and some of the anxiousness behind this move.
Mhm.
And I think that's very important because you do, I mean, even if you don't need therapy or, or coaching or whatever, it's still a good idea to make sure that you're in the right headspace because this
Mhm.
move, and particularly when you've been used to one set of rules, meaning the United States, and that brainwashing, you
Mhm.
do need something to help you realize or to get deeper within yourself to say, okay, what is this move about? How am I going to make this move and how is it going to impact me emotionally? So
Mhm.
for me, I was like, you know what, let me get some therapy. And there's nothing
Yeah,
wrong
good
with
for you.
therapy.
That's
Get some
right.
coaching, whatever
Everybody
you want
needs
to
it.
call it, what right? Especially if you're from here, you know.
Mm. Hello.
Oh,
Yes, yes. And then, also too, I think even with your journey and making the decision to move solo, and you'll be working with your therapist presumably on how to stay connected to, your family, your
right.
husband, and
Yeah.
what that dynamic is going to look like. But one thing I'll say to you as well is it's only been through this journey for myself that I found more and more women who are married, who are moving, and their spouse is staying in, with their home country, whether it be the United States or somewhere else.
Mm,
And so I've been finding it interesting. Actually, one of our members here, she and her husband did the process, but then he went back, for some time, for like a year. And
okay.
it's just, and there's other women that have done it as well. And I've been finding that so fascinating,
Yeah.
that one, that people are doing it and not counting themselves out, that
Right.
because I'm a couple, that means we have to move in
Right.
unison. But physically moving away does not mean you're not moving in unison, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
I think it's just a matter of languaging it differently,
Right.
also recognizing that there are other people that are on that similar path and normalizing that.
Yeah. And you actually hooked me up with a lady who we've been kind of talking back and forth about that. So speaking with her has been very helpful, relieving a
Yay!
little bit of my anxiety about it.
Mhm.
But so that has been helpful.
Yeah.
Because people don't talk about it. And when you
Hmm.
like we discussed before, when you do talk about it, you letting your wife, I mean, my husband's friend, you letting your wife go with me, letting me. This is a partnership, not a dictatorship. This is right.
I'm
This is a
like,
partnership.
exactly.
So,
Wait,
yeah.
what? It's funny how people want to insert themselves in other people's like story.
Right.
And it's like, you know what? I'm sorry that your life is so boring that you feel like you need to be
Put your little 2 cent in there.
right. Like, who invited you to this narrative? What
Right.
story are you creating
Right. Right.
and projecting feelings that you're projecting? Wow. Wow.
And he just chuckled and like, whatever, man. So,
Mhm.
so how do you overcome, or how have you overcome the fear of starting over
Ooh,
after decades of being in the same routine?
I loves it. I loves it. I'm the queen of the pivot. You know, when if you looked up my professional career on LinkedIn,
Uh,
it is not linear by any stretch of the
oh, okay.
imagination.
Okay.
I've done whatever I've wanted to do. And so, whether it be I've worked in television, I've worked in politics, I've
Hmm.
worked in digital marketing, I worked for,
Wow.
I was a lobbyist, big pharma, you know, the whole
Oh,
big thing.
okay. Oh, you
And
one of those, huh? Big pharma
yeah,
lobby. Hmm.
yeah. Well, not, I
That's
wasn't a big
why.
pharma lobbyist. No, no.
Oh, okay.
I was an
Okay.
insurer lobbyist, all
Okay.
different things. When I worked in pharma, it was for in the consumer packaged goods. So at the time, a lot of the pharma companies owned over-the-counter medications.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I was doing digital marketing. And
Oh, okay.
so it's not linear, right? So if I found myself wanting to be interested in something, that's what I did. You know,
Hmm.
when I got out of college, I had always wanted to be in politics. I did that for a number of
Oh,
years.
okay.
I went back to school and became a social worker, and I did that for a few years. And then I went into television, and my baby's
Hi,
waking up.
baby.
Baby, baby, you okay?
Hi.
Waking up. You wanted to say
Oh,
hi to Angela? Is that what
hi,
it was?
sweetie.
Okay. Is that you
Oh.
just getting comfy? Okay. Oops. Sorry about that. Um, but you know, I wanted to go into television. I pursued that. And so as and then as I started to see certain shifts
Hmm.
in the marketplace, I
Hmm.
pursued those things. So when I
Oh.
saw things shifting towards digital, I was like, okay, all of this, you know, government. I was more in a government role at that point. I was like, this is all fine and good, but like this is the future. And if I had to do it over, I was thinking to myself, I would have studied like computer science or more in the technology field. But that didn't mean that I couldn't do something adjacent to it. And
Hmm.
so I learned digital marketing. And so I've never been afraid of trying something new. And even, you know, Blaxit Global, right? The world was
Yeah.
on fire in 2020 and I decided to grab a mic, get into the DMs of people who I didn't know and who didn't know me and ask them to tell me their story about how they moved abroad. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I pursue things that I'm interested in. I'm never afraid to start over. Everybody has a day zero. And so you know, whether it's speaking to one or speaking to millions, you know,
Hmm.
everybody has a day one. And so it's your life is the sum of all of the decisions you made.
Hmm.
If you gain a pound, it isn't from the cookie that you ate this morning. It's
Right.
from all the cookies that you ate before that
Right.
day, right? And it's the same. So I just look at it like everything compounds on it. And so starting over, yeah, I started over after I ended my marriage, right? That was a
Right.
choice. And so when we come into this world, we have to be ready to face things. And some things are going to be great, and
Hmm.
some things are going to be challenging and tough. But I think the more that you allow yourself to be nimble and malleable and open
Hmm.
to the changes that life presents you and
Hmm.
making a choice, the better off you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. If you had to write a letter to your future self in 5 years,
Mm.
what would you tell them about the life you've created? My
Ooh,
therapist asked me this, and I was like going, okay, what would you tell
wow.
them about the life you've created?
That's an interesting one because I wrote a letter to my future self a few years ago. And so when I was packing to leave the States, I found the letter
Mm-hmm.
and I shared it in our YouTube community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I shared it in our Blaxit Global Passport community. And it was very interesting. And so I haven't done a new letter. And so this one is live on the fly. What did I write? Um, I'll put it in the context of when I was in where was I at that point? Thailand. I was in Chiang Mai.
Uh-huh.
And so when I went to Chiang Mai just a few weeks ago, I really indulged in going to the spa. And so this one week that I was in Chiang Mai, every other day I went to the spa and had a 3-day a 3-hour spa treatment. And so the last day that I was there, it happened to be Valentine's Day. I wasn't paying attention.
Oh.
And I had this beautiful hour and a half massage and foot treatment and this herbal bath. And so I come in and they had champagne and,
Ooh.
flowers and all this stuff in the tub. And it just smelled so good and it was so indulgent and, fruit and all the stuff. And I said to myself, wow, I am the love of my life. Like
I love
I
it.
am, right? So if I were writing something to my future self about this version, yes, it was a discovery of learning that it wasn't external sources and validation that I need to seek. It
Mm-hmm.
was always here,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was always within. I just needed to love myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Flaws and all,
Laws and all.
and pour into it. I flew me all over the world. I brought me here to Portugal. I got that yacht for my birthday. Like I treat myself very well. And so the barrier for anyone who comes into my life who's
Mm-hmm.
blessed enough to be that close, right?
Mm-hmm.
The barrier is so high because you have to vibrate not necessarily on what I can do for myself. It's because I love myself so much
Mm-hmm.
now
Mm-hmm.
that you have to match that energy. You
Yeah.
cannot come low frequency and think, oh, doing the bare minimum is
Right.
going to get my attention. It's not.
Right.
It's not because
Mm.
I deserve so much more.
Right. Right. And that's beautiful because that's what we need to look at it, especially at this time in our lives. We need
Mhm.
to love ourselves to the max. We poured all
Yeah.
that love into everybody else that it's time for us to pour that love into us.
Hmm.
And if that means doing whatever it is, if it means, going on a trip if you can every year and just indulging in yourself, then yeah, that frequency, like you said, that high vibrational frequency is so important.
Hmm.
And you don't want folks around you who are not vibrating at that level, or at least, and I'll even give some grace, at least you see them progressing to try to get to
Hmm.
that level,
Hmm.
So I like that. That's because I have to write a letter because my therapist, she said, because talking about the move and everything, because that's been
Hmm.
a really an issue for me right now.
Yeah, of course.
Um, and I always think, now, if I was by myself, it'd probably be easier, but I have to take so many other people into consideration and blah, blah, blah. But she said, write a letter to yourself. What would you tell you if you didn't move? If you decided, I'm not going to do it right now, and in 5 years you wrote a letter to your future self, what would you be saying if you didn't do what you want to do? If you
Mhm.
didn't make this move, if you didn't make this transition, what would you be telling yourself, your future self, about why you didn't do it? So that really, I was like, okay, that's, you don't want to tell your future self, well, I was scared to do so and so, so I didn't.
I love that provocation. Like, when you think about future self, you're always thinking about it in the affirmative, like, oh yeah, doing all the things.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that, like, okay, you want this, but if you choose to go the other route,
Right.
what are you going to tell your future self about
Right.
that? Ooh, well,
Yeah.
therapist, high five. baby. I love that.
Got
Okay.
me a black therapist. I said,
Yeah, look,
God
that's the only one you can have, right?
right?
Wow, I love that. Wow, that's
That was,
gold. That's
yep.
gold right there.
So, leading into that, what advice would you have for someone who's afraid to take the first step towards reinventing themselves at this stage?
Ooh, don't give in to fear.
Mm,
Don't give in to fear.
hmm.
Fear is just things that haven't happened,
Yeah,
and they may never,
they may never.
right?
Right.
They may never. It's your mind. My uncle, it's funny. My mother's brother is hilarious. His name is Uncle Buddy. So shout out to Uncle Buddy if you're watching. Um, and he has all these isms.
I love the isms
So
from the elders.
yes, he has these isms. And one of the isms that he says is like train your monkey, right? And
Okay.
I sometimes have to do that
Hmm.
because in meaning your monkey brain, right? Like your monkey
Oh,
brain will
yes,
go
yes.
off and just think of all these scenarios of things that haven't happened, you
Right.
know, and it'll just go off. And he's like, train your monkey.
Mm.
And sometimes I'll hear him say that and I'm like, oh, you know what? What am I doing? Like, why am I even giving energy or thought to this? Right.
I'm writing that down
And
now.
then
Train your monkey.
train your monkey, train your monkey. And so sometimes when I spin out on something, I'm just like, where did that even come from?
Right.
Right. And realizing that like any muscle in your body, your
Hmm.
mind also
Needs
needs
training.
training.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your mind also needs training. And
Yeah.
what are you doing every day
Hmm.
to train your monkey? And
Right.
so some of that is, journaling that I'm working towards doing again. Other part of it is just reading different things daily. I do mind exercises.
Yes.
Some
Hmm.
of that is language. Some of
Hmm.
that is I play Wordle, mind games during the
Hmm.
day, just things to keep my brain active. And I also think that because I live abroad and I'm doing it at this stage, like I said before, every day is different than the day before. And so, because my
Hmm.
brain is constantly being stimulated, and
Right.
it's not like that movie Groundhog Day,
The
which is
same
what my
routine. Yeah.
existence felt like in the States. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, I could do it in my sleep. I could
Right.
sleepwalk.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like I knew. It was like, I'll get
Mm.
up, get the kids ready for school, get a car, get a shower, get them home, get them to do it again. Go to sleep, get
Right.
up and do it
Right.
again.
Exactly. No,
Right?
absolutely.
And it
Absolutely.
just, and then you get your day and a half because it's not really 2 days on the
No,
weekend,
it's
right?
not.
Because you're
Mm-mm.
miserable about having to go back to work the next day.
Girl.
And I would say to anybody, like, don't give in to fear, right? Because if you're thinking about all of the things that could go wrong, all of the bad things that could happen, and not training your monkey, what you're missing out is, what if everything goes right?
Right.
What if everything is better than you imagined?
Right.
You have to have your idea of what you want your new life and your move to look like, but you have to leave some blank space,
Hmm.
because where the blank space is where the magic happens, where serendipity happens, where things that you're like, I didn't even know I could call this upon for myself.
Mm.
The people you might meet, the things that you're going to experience, the opportunities that get laid before you.
Right.
You don't know the you that's on the other side. The
Mm.
only you know is the you that has existed in the confines of the United States, in the confines of a country that wants to keep you small, that wants to, dissuade you from chasing your dreams,
Right.
that also wants to always dangle an American dream that that is elusive. So why not dream a new dream? Why not take the reins and design a life that you love? I
Right.
always say, live your life by design, not by default. And so if
Mm.
you're sitting here and you're watching this and anything that I said has inspired you in any way, I want you to look at me. I want you to look at Angela. I want you to look at other people and realize, don't count yourself out.
Right. Now you said live your life by dream and not by default.
Live your life by design
By
and not by
design.
default.
Girl, I'll be writing down all the euphemisms. Not by default. Another thing, and maybe most people have heard this before, but another thing my therapist was saying is she said, don't live in fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, maybe I've heard that before, but it's brand new again to me. So I wrote that down.
Mm-hmm.
And, I
Mm-hmm.
like to, when I hear something like this that's very inspiring, then I'm like, okay, type it up, paste it somewhere where I can always see it. Because I know
Mm-hmm.
for me, one of the things that I had to change again was that fear. But being on YouTube, doing this type of podcast, I would have never done it 3 years ago, but I knew I
Mm-hmm.
needed a change. I needed to do something different. And I did a lot of at night listening to, positive, so
Affirmations.
affirmations. So it would
Mm-hmm.
get deep into my subconscious level because
Wow.
that programming is so deep. Sometimes
Yes.
just reading a book, sometimes just doing it on the superficial level, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
working for me. So I was like, okay, there has to
Wow.
be something going on that's deeper. So that was just for a whole year. I would have different affirmations, different folks talking about subconscious healing and just every night. And it really
Wow.
has helped. I need to go
Mm-hmm.
back to it because you kind of stop and then there's some
Yeah.
areas where I'm going, you know what, I need to get back into that because I can see some things changing
Mm-hmm.
and not for the better. So I was like, okay. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the reasons why I'm like, it's time to get a therapist, and
Yeah.
really talk these things
Good for
out.
you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Um, what myth about aging did you debunk through your experiences of starting over?
Ooh, 50 isn't old.
It is not.
It's like when I remember, and I think it's all a matter of perspective, right? Like when my mom turned 50, or when, you read articles about people turning 50 when I was younger, it
Hmm.
just felt so old,
Right.
right? And now that I'm here, I'm like, 50 isn't old. And then my siblings are 60s. So I'm like,
Okay.
well,
Yeah.
60 isn't old.
Right. That's right around the corner. That's what I look at. It's right around the corner.
Right. So I'm like, is it a state of mind? Is it a state of consciousness, right?
Mhm.
Are there certain things about my physical body that reminds me of my chronological age? Absolutely. My knees being one of them. Right. Um, and so that's been an adjustment for sure. Things moving a little differently or embracing more elastic waistbands. It's like, oh, I see. These are my friends, right?
Yeah.
Um, but that's okay, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of this chapter of my life, right? Is
Yeah.
debunking things like is it old or is it maturity, right? When you look at
Yeah.
a bottle of wine that has
Vintage.
aged, it's vintage, right?
I have a
And I'm
t-shirt that says
like,
that I'm vintage.
yeah. So I'm like, I'm just sauntering into this soulful, sexy version of myself, right?
Girl.
And so that's how I'm like, and challenging those old, perceptions that I might have had. And
Right.
that also, even though I realize that 50 is far from old,
Right.
like I said before about ageism, it exists in America and there is, still some societal relics and thoughts about it. I mean, really, it's only been, as far as I can remember, recent that people are talking about menopause and perimenopause in the
Yeah.
open discourse
Right.
and discovering that these changes because a bunch of us are hitting this stage at the
Right.
same time and saying,
Right.
well, what is this, and
Right.
let's talk about it. That's
Right.
not something that I ever heard people talking about when my mom
Oh
was at
no.
this age. And so
Mm-mm.
I think that, again, with technology, it's a great time to be on this journey of moving abroad. It's also a great time to be in this chapter of being a woman in her 50s and approaching another more exciting stage of life because I can explore it with wisdom.
Hmm.
I can embrace these different things about myself and about the women around me and celebrate them.
Right.
And then if there's a problem, I have the money to solve it.
Beautiful. I like that. My last question.
Yes.
What does it mean to be unapologetically 50 plus to you?
Ooh. Um, mm, feels fabulous. It feels fabulous. Feels well earned. Well earned.
Well earned. All right.
Mhm.
That is amazing. Krishan, I thank you so much for coming on because, like I said, I listen to you. You're amazing. I love your authenticity. I'm living vicariously through you for now.
Can't wait till you're here.
I know. And it sounds like you've had a beautiful journey, and I truly appreciate you sharing that journey with us. So, that's it for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Please, I'm going to have Krishan's information in the description. Please follow her on YouTube if you have any desire to move out of the country or just even travel. Then, watch her. She has a lot of amazing stories and information, and, she's just an amazing woman. So, thank you again, Krishan. And
Thank you.
you guys, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification, and I will see you again next week. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.